Well, hello everyone. I'm gonna make this intro quick because we are just jumping right in with part 2 of the Goth Manor build, and if you haven't watched part 1 yet, then I highly recommend doing so since I go through the entire floor plan and all of that in the part 1 episode. Now, for those of you just joining me and just getting to know my little corner of the internet, my name is Michael, and I want to welcome you to Sovereign Gaming in Life Sims, the YouTube channel where I build worlds, lots, and share my thoughts on video games in the life simulation gaming space. We are indeed continuing the build out of my SimCity world here, just lot by lot at this point. And yeah, my apologies for the quick intro there. As I mentioned in part 1 of the build out, I did not anticipate that this would be a 3-part speed build series, and mostly that is just due to the sheer scale of Goth Manor and what I ended up building it out to be. And so yeah, the episodes are all spliced up because I just made a last minute decision essentially, just to get them split up into their own separate parts. And so yeah, the splits were definitely not graceful to say the very least here. And so I'm just having to split them where I think it kind of makes sense and just jumping into it. So yeah, today we are in part 2 of the 3 parts of building out Goth Manor. And in this part, what we are going to be doing is we are going to be building out the first level and then also the backyard as well. I think that in part 1 I had misspoke and said that we would be building out the basement. Well, that's not going to be the case, as we will be building out the basement in part 3. Luckily though, and you guys are going to see why as well, when I'm building out each of the floors here, the ground level took the most time, and that's really because I was having to choose between the different designs and the different color palettes and as such. And so yeah, that took a little bit more time. And once I have all of those elements selected and looking the way that I need them to look, everything else just kind of falls into place a lot more easily. And you'll definitely see why in part 3 as we finish up with the basement, the remaining parts of the second floor and also the third floor as well. But yeah, today we are building out this first floor, and in the last episode I just kind of built out that atrium with the wedding arch centerpiece, and now we are just kind of moving on to some of the biggest parts of the house, and that's really the 2 ballrooms that I have that I built in the last episode, and that's like the eastern wing and the western wing ballrooms. So yeah, there's a lot to do here, especially in taking that into consideration. And what I had decided to do and what I end up carrying out doing is I end up building out the second and third floors in the ballroom space, and same with the library space as well, if my memory serves me correctly here. And so a big reason why that was the case is just because I wanted to continue off of the momentum of building each of those rooms out, and while I'm on an idea, I like to just kind of go with it and just to finish that idea and to complete the task before moving on to another space. So that's a reason why, even though I'm saying in this episode we really only build the ground floor and the backyard, there are some exceptions, and that's really the ballrooms and probably the library as well, since I just really needed each of those levels to be cohesive. When deciding on the color palette, I really wanted to use a darker color palette, of course, because this is the Goth Manor and that is exactly what is being prescribed here, so that's what I've got to deliver on. But when it came to like Gothic interior design, I really didn't want it to feel overwhelming or to may have it feel like it's appealing to a certain subset of Gothic culture, such as, you know, something more Addams Family inspired or something very Beetlejuice inspired. I wanted to stray away from that, and I really wanted to hone in on something that I feel is a little more realistic, as a modern revival of Gothic style within a home. And so what I did to try to achieve that palette is I really wanted to balance off the panels, the stone, the woods, and the marbles with each other. Like they all would follow the same kind of color palette. And so I felt like they all complemented each other quite well without having to dive into any specific Gothic subculture too intensely or too deeply. Like, there are little pockets of those kind of designs here and there, but that's definitely not what I wanted to be the overarching theme here. I really wanted I wanted anybody to really walk into this mansion and feel like they could still own it or buy it as is and not feel completely alienated by the interior decorating choices. So yeah, that was really the approach that I wanted to make on this one here. And I had mentioned it in part 1, but when it came to the 2 ballrooms, I know I'm calling them ballrooms, but really one of them functions more like a cigar room. But for the eastern ballroom on the eastern wing of the house, the ballroom is actually located a lot closer to the kitchen, and so I figured that it would have more easy access to food, and so you would probably direct your guests to like eat and drink within that room because you had access to the kitchen and its resources, and you'll see how the kitchen turns out, which, by the way, I feel is just awesome. So but yeah, the eastern ballroom is something that I really tried to design to be more casual, to have, those elements of food and drink in it. Whereas the Western ballroom, I actually designed to feature more musical elements. So you have a grand piano right in the middle of it. Like, I envisioned when designing the Western ballroom that you would actually have, ballroom dances within that space. Whereas on the eastern side, the eastern ballroom, I should say, that one I designed with the, with the idea that it would be used more like a cigar room or somewhere to just kind of like casually get together with. I even threw in a mixology bar there too, so that when you do host parties, you can hire a mixologist and they'll actually go into that room. I wanted players to feel like they could host a party on the main floor without it feeling without having to go into the basement and using the space there, because I don't know about you guys, but sometimes in my single family homes, if I'm hosting a large party or a large get together, I will usually try to get the guests to go to the basement where there's like a stereo and stuff, just because it doesn't fit the vibe of the main floor there. That might be the case when I actually get around to doing the Blue Water Village single family homes, but in this case, I really wanted to make both of the ballrooms places where you can host parties, and places where if you had a bunch of Sims over, they wouldn't necessarily need to go to the basement or to somewhere that has more entertainment objects. They could just kind of chill here. And to be quite honest, like gameplay, speaking about the gameplay, I don't even think your guests could make it to the basement. And I mean that, and I'm not trying to be mean about The Sims 3 or anything, but usually Sims will get lost if they're trying to navigate a fairly complicated lot. And honestly, Goth Manor is pretty complicated, and I placed the stairs to the basement in like access to those stairs through the kitchen, so players can at least feel comfortable having Sims just kind of congregate in both of the ballrooms here. I'm not too sure if it's in this part, but definitely in part 3 there is a powder room that I added in the library, just because it was an awkward space that I wasn't too sure what to add in. But yeah, if that makes it into this part of the video, I would be quite surprised, because it was one of the last details that I offered. But I wanted to mention that because yeah, as players, like when you're hosting a party in this mansion, those Sim guests will have access to absolutely everything they need. If they need to eat something, the kitchen is right on this floor. If they need to party or to like listen to music, they have both of the ballrooms. There's also some activities in the cigar room style ballroom. There's lots for Sims to do, and they don't necessarily need to roam throughout the entire house to find a space to actually congregate and celebrate in. So that was really a gameplay choice that I wanted to try to achieve here with the 2 ballrooms. And yeah, I am talking a lot about the ballrooms because they are indeed a big focal point of this mansion build. I mean, they take up the majority of the house. They are 3 floors tall, and they certainly are a feature of the home that I feel is something that I don't normally go for. In fact, like I know for a fact that I probably won't be doing ballroom builds for any future mansions. As far as I'm aware, I'm happy to be wrong for myself, but yeah, usually I'll just do like an extended living room or something like I did with the crumple bottom chateau and whatnot. One of my favorite color palettes is a black, a white, and a red. And something that I just kind of wanted to share with you guys, and I don't mean to over explain the color palette choices that I was making, but the specific shade of red that I decided to go with was the color of crimson. And I mean, there was a whole hex code copied over from Google and whatnot. So whatever Google was telling me was crimson was what I had copied over. But anyways, I just kind of wanted to share that with you guys because it made a lot of the decor feel a lot darker than I guess the game should normally feel. I mean, when looking at the house, it's very clear that it is, you know, owned by the Goth family. And even though I just said that I wanted to try and make the decor as like as unalienating as possible, that really isn't the case in that kind of sense, just because blacks, whites, and reds are very bold color palettes, and they're very bold colors to use in combination with each other. And even though you could redecorate the entire place and get rid of all of the red, and it would probably feel a lot more palatable for a wider audience, I still decided to go with the red with that in mind, because even though I wanted it to not feel as specific as like a Beetlejuice inspired or an Addams Family inspired build, I did want there to be some strong choices in terms of the decor, which is why, you know, the entrance is lit up in red and there's a whole like red wedding arch there. But yeah, there are a lot of darker themes throughout and present throughout the Goth Manor, and it's not a style that I want to decorate in going forward. It just has to make sense for the place that I am decorating, and in this case it does, and I happen to be very good at it. So it's not necessarily a style that I naturally gravitate towards, but it is certainly something that I felt was done very well for the Goth Manor. And even though I wasn't going for a specific subculture when doing the Goth interior design, I feel like it's still very dark at the same time. Anyways, the walls that I decided to choose were panels, and I had a couple of reasons for that. And if you recognize the panels from the condo build that I did, the penthouse build, and the Champagne's exclusive lounge build, then you've got a really sharp eye, because I did absolutely use the same ones here. And the reason being for that is because panels look good when stacked on top of each other when emulating multiple levels of floors. And so I just pretty much copied them over. They were already set at the correct shade of black that I wanted, which is something that isn't too dark because it completely mutes the details in the paneling, and it was something that was dark enough for this space here. So I pretty much copied that over. I might have even like made it a slightly lighter, but yeah. These panels are certainly something that I feel are very flexible in terms of emulating different styles, and you're going to see that, especially in the next episode when I do some of the bedroom builds, because those bedrooms use the same paneling, but I just changed the color to something else, and it gives the room an entirely different look and feel. I feel like, you know, as you would have seen in the penthouse build, that panels like this, even though they are very traditional, they can also be paired with really modern setups and really modern twists that help to add some more modernity within the actual build. So that was another reason why I actually saved those panels, is because I just know for a fact that I am going to be using them in future builds. What those future builds will be have yet to be determined, but I absolutely love them, and I will continue to use them, whether I'm using the same black ones that I've been doing here or if I'm switching them up to a different color. It's going to be right for the space and all that jazz. So yeah, the panels were definitely copied over from the penthouse build and from the exclusive lounge champagnes that I was doing before. And yeah, the other panels that I found on the Sims 3, like just with all the expansion packs and all that, I just found that they were either, they just really didn't fit the spaces correctly. Like in the editing episode that I had released just before I went on a break there, I changed the panelings out from champagnes into this one actually. Well, not this one specifically, but to the wall panels that that were recolored. The same wall panels, just recolored. It's really what I mean to say. And the reason why I did that is because the ones that were used in the Champagne's exclusive lounge just felt like they were too detailed and too busy, whereas this feels like a cleaner cut. Very hard to explain. I hope I explained that correctly for you, but they are certainly there. I don't know if they came with a specific expansion pack or if they're just with the base game or with a stuff pack, but love these panels. One thing that I did keep very basic throughout the build here is actually the garages. The garages are very basic. I kind of ran out of ideas with them. What I was more concerned about with the garages was really how the east and the west garages were going to have a door that leads into the room. For the east wing garage, that one led right into the dining room, and I kind of hated that. I think it's either at the end of this part or at the end of part 3 when I go back to do a bunch of rooms that I actually built it its own hallway so that you didn't have to like look at the door leading out into the garage, or people, you know, Sims coming through the garage, which they never do. They always despawn their vehicles and go through their front door, no matter what game or what save file or what lot I'm playing. But yeah, that's kind of the issue there. Another thing that you'll see throughout this part and throughout the next part is the use of those invisible lights. I remember saying in one of my previous episodes that I try to avoid using those lights whenever possible, and it's true, I still try to avoid them, but this was a situation where I just couldn't avoid using those invisible lights from the buy debug mode, and so I had to use them throughout the ballrooms just to make sure that everything was lit up properly, because to me, lighting is pretty much everything. And yeah, I just needed to have those, and you know, the multi-level chandeliers just really don't bring any kind of light to the ground level. So I really had to use those invisible lights quite liberally throughout this build, if I'm going to be completely honest, which is kind of disappointing, but at the same time, it was something very necessary. And I would try to pair it with, you know, one of those multi-level ceiling lights or ceiling chandeliers just to kind of give it that illusion that there is an actual lighting source. But hey, we'll just kind of see where it takes us from there. With the dining room as well, I really wanted the focus on the dining room to be of the table in the middle. I wanted it to be a lawn table, and I also wanted to keep it simple. We have 2 fireplaces on either end of them. There's tons to look at there. So just all I really needed to do, and with the with the wall panels that I chose, they look very nice and they're pretty decorative in of themselves. So I really didn't have to spend a whole lot of time in the dining room trying to completely fill out each of the walls there, which was really nice and a relief for me. When I was designing the library, unfortunately, the choice that I had to make was I had to choose the bookshelves that came with the Into the Future expansion pack. Now, the reason why I had to choose those is because those were the only bookshelves that I guess were over 3 floors high. And that was something that surprised me from Into the Future, but it also surprised me in another sense that we've never had bookshelves that actually that were taller than just one single floor. Like there were some floor to ceiling ones, but never ones that actually were taller than just that one floor. So the fact that we had these available was something that I was very impressed and surprised by. But the unfortunate part is that the books themselves kind of glow in the dark a little bit. And so my hand was forced a little bit when making the choice to include those bookshelves in here. And I did design the library to be 3 floors high or 3 stories tall, because these bookshelves were available for me to use. And yeah, these bookshelves would definitely like not be my number one choice, but because they're the only ones that actually are taller than a single floor, I decided to kind of design the library around them. Now, I did recolor them in the first episode to try and get them to match the older style bookshelves as best as I can, like especially the bookshelves where they are actually like the secret door bookshelves. I try to get them to match them as best as I can, but obviously with the design limitations of this asset, that just simply was not possible to get an exact match. So I just kind of had to make do there. Now, I have experimented in the past with placing things on multiple levels, and what can happen is that they can appear like they're floating between each of the objects. So if you place like a bookshelf and then with move objects place another bookshelf directly on top of it, the bookshelf that's on top of the other one would just kind of look like it's floating. I kind of had that issue in the penthouse build when I was doing that regarding the fireplace and placing a plant on top of the fireplace. I'm sure that you guys saw that and everything, and I ended up having to edit it just because the floating plant really wasn't something that I was going for. But yeah, the library here is certainly like it's a highlight of the home, of course. Like, I mean, the ballrooms are a highlight, but it's just like it just goes to show how much of a masterpiece the Goth Manor really is. And I'm sorry if I'm sounding like I'm bragging here, but I'm honestly look back at the footage, I interact with the lot a lot, and you know, I'm just really amazed to like how nice it came together. And so yeah, I like I'm trying not to be I'm trying not to brag about it. I'm trying to be humble about it as best as I can, but I know when I've done a good job, and this is a build where I've done a really superb job at. The only thing that I might change for the library is just that little games room that I sort of placed. It was sort of something like I even placed the moon dial object in it, which is something that I've never really placed anywhere in my Sims games, but yeah, it was something that I placed in there, and that games room with the train sets and the chess and all that, it was very much an afterthought. And so yeah, that was kind of what I was, that might be something that's up for reinterpretation or up to be edited in a future editing episode that's far in the future and all that. If you have any suggestions, of course, feel free to comment them below. If there is like a certain section of a library that you think needs to be added in, absolutely share your comments. My idea with the library design was that the first level was going to be the analog library, so anything to do with your hands and reading and books and all that, because they're really the only ones you can actually grab the books from. But then the second floor is more like the technology library, where there are some computers and, you know, again, more books. Like it isn't completely clean, which is why I placed some of those supernatural books lying around and all that. But then the third floor of the library is really that skill library. And this might be something that's actually a little more out of place. And maybe I should switch this with what I did in that northern western wing extension is, you know, I placed a bunch of more artistic skill objects there. Maybe I can make the bottom floor into an art room and put the train sets up here, for example. My idea with the keeping the train sets separate in that extension on the west wing is just that I wanted to reduce as much noise as possible. But seeing as how the library is adjacent to both the ballroom with a grand piano in it and also to the train sets, I don't think this library is particularly avoiding any kind of noise or distractions in that kind of sense. But again, like if you guys have any suggestions for what I should do, or if you think I should switch some of those artistic skill objects with some of the ones with some of the train sets on the lower levels and just trying to switch up the functions a little bit, feel free to comment below. I do not mind reading those suggestions, and when it comes to editing the mansion lots, I will definitely not be editing them until I'm actually working directly in Pleasant View and filling up the rest of the lots. But with that said, I will definitely be looking at comments on videos such as this. So yeah, if you have any suggestions, feel free to drop them in the comment section below. I will definitely read them and kind of take note of them. So yeah, another thing that I really struggled with this build in general was placing paintings on walls and trying to fill up walls. Again, this is why those wallpaper panels really come in handy, because they're decorative enough and simple enough at the same time that you don't necessarily need to place something on those walls. Those walls can actually do a statement piece on their own. But yeah, when placing paintings on, especially like the second and third floors, like above the fireplaces, I really had to get creative with that, and I actually ended up placing a shelf and a couple of the bouquet. It's not a bouquet of flowers, but flowers in a large pot. I found those large potted flowers from one of these store item sets, and I decided to just kind of place them on top so that the eye's drawn upwards to the paintings. And now when it comes to the paintings, like some of those paintings are just not large enough, and I really hate repeated paintings on the same lot. So that was something I was looking to avoid. Thankfully, with the Supernatural expansion pack, it came with a bunch of paintings, like haunted paintings and such, and so I just kind of used those where I could, because I felt that they fit the theme of the Goth Manor, but they also were something that are nice to begin with. Like, even if they weren't haunted paintings, I would still use them. Speaking of which, like, if you are wondering what those narrow hallways are, I did explain what those hidden passages are for, and I'm not going to repeat myself here, but I will say that the design that I was really using for those is that I kind of wanted those hidden passages to be like dusty and to feel very much like they're an integral part of the structure that you can just kind of slip by and slip through and all of that. So the lighting that I used within the hidden passages, I decided to make the lighting very dim so that, you know, as a player, you don't necessarily need to pay attention or notice the hidden passages, and the focus is really on the rooms that are open to the public. All right, let me talk to you guys about the kitchen here, because the kitchen is absolutely one of the rooms in the Goth Manor build that I absolutely fell in love with. But to be honest, like, I fell in love with each of the rooms as I was building them. I really love this project to bits and pieces, honestly, but the kitchen was certainly something else and a highlight for me personally. Now, as I was taking my break from YouTube and all that, I was actually watching a little bit of Netflix, and what came on was The Haunting of Bly Manor. It's an older series, I guess, like by Netflix standards, and I guess I'm just like late to the party, but I decided to binge watch that series there, and the one thing that I absolutely loved about it was the mansion that it all took place in. Specifically, I loved the kitchen. Now I'm going to throw up a screenshot of the kitchen that I used for inspiration for it, but I really loved about the kitchen was that there was this alcove with a huge fireplace in it, and so I really wanted to add that into the Goth Manor because I felt like it fit the theme of the cast of the mansion, sort of it being this castle-like mansion with Gothic inspired interior decor, and I felt like it stayed true to maybe the structure's original roots there. So I felt that the style didn't detract necessarily from the rest of the house, but that it actually complemented the rest of the house by just giving it a completely different story to tell. Another thing that really helps with this kitchen kind of detracting away from the overall themes of like the Gothic themes and all that is that there's a hallway between the kitchen and the dining room. So there's a bit of separation and a transition actually into the kitchen. But yeah, the kitchen was just fantastic. I absolutely love how it turned out. And for my eagle-eyed viewers out there, you would have seen me in episode 1 when I was part 1, I should say, when I was designing out the main floor and all that I actually even added in a dumbwaiter as well. or at least a fake one. You see, there you can't actually have like dumbwaiters in The Sims 3, so I actually decided to just put in a fake one there that just goes to the lower level into the mudroom in the basement, and I'll build out that mudroom at a later time. But for now, like, the kitchen is somewhere that I absolutely love about this house. I tried to create the alcove as best as I can. Maybe I should have used some archways as opposed to the pillars and the half walls, but I'll let you guys be the judge on that one there. If you feel like you would have done something differently that would achieve that kind of alcove effect that the Bly Manor kitchen had, then feel free to suggest in the comment section below. I really don't mind. After all, I'm gonna probably do some edits with Goth Manor whenever I do the Pleasant View edit episode sometime in the future. Now, the thing that I really that I decided to do with the kitchen that is kind of different from Bly Manor's kitchen is that I really didn't want to have Sims eating in the kitchen. I want them to be eating in the dining room at all times. And so I couldn't put in like a traditional island with some seating. And so what I decided to do instead is I decided to put in a couple of tables there, much like the inspiration from the Haunting of Bly Manor series, except instead of like adding in some chairs there, I just decided to add in a bunch of food. So the idea here is that all of those tables that you see that are closer to the stoves, like further away from the dining room, is all food that is meant to be like chopped or prepared in some way, shape, or form, whereas the food closer to the dining room is ready to serve to your guests. So that was kind of the idea that I had when designing out this kitchen here, and just kind of trying to like tell that story, is to add in those tables, and instead of having the seating, having it all as this huge preparation area, so that it really helped to make players feel like they could serve a true banquet from this kitchen alone. Now, I know in the Crumple Bottom Chateau build, I actually gave them 3 kitchens. I gave them like a spice kitchen and also an industrial kitchen to serve theirs, whereas this one is more like just one big, huge kitchen where you can just do everything that you need to do within it. So yeah, I absolutely love this kitchen to bits and pieces. This is easily one of my favorite kitchens, and that's something about like different interior styles and decor as well, is that even though like a Gothic style or a Gothic themed decor isn't something that I naturally gravitate towards myself, when it's right for the location, I can certainly still find ways to make it look good for me at least. And I have a lot of respect for different styles that I just don't normally gel with. I mean, there's the whole 90s thing that I really struggled with way back when I was doing some of those apartment and bridge view builds, but it's a style that I completely respect because it tells the story of an era. And that's something that I really wanted to bring to this build as well, is that even though I'm not necessarily someone who gravitates toward Gothic styles or Gothic interior designs, that I can certainly respect it and still use it quite effectively. And you know, I hate to keep patting myself on the back, but I'm actually pretty good with the Gothic interior design at the very least here, or the Gothic or the darker themed designs here, even though I'm not necessarily someone that gravitates towards it. And yeah, this again, like this kitchen just has some great details to it. The dumbwaiter or something like going to the mud room just below it is a really great detail that I enjoyed about it. The hidden passageways actually leading into the kitchen, so that you have Bonehilda just kind of popping into this kitchen to grab some food and then to serve it, or to, you know, bring a snack down to wherever, is another great detail that's just put into this kitchen here. There's just so many great things I can talk about this kitchen that I can honestly just go on and on forever about it. The walls were perfect, the floors were perfect. I just really feel like it told the story. The inspiration is clearly there, and with what I am given in The Sims 3, I was able to achieve that vision and to achieve that kind of level of storytelling quite effectively here. And so yeah, I'm very happy with it. The only thing that's kind of awkward within this space is actually the door that just leads to the pantry, that leads to the stairs that lead into the basement, weird little sentence there, but that space was a weird one to work with. And like I had mentioned in part 1 of the Goth Manor build, when you're building with foundations on top of a basement space, and as soon as you start putting walls around it, it starts to act a little weird. And even though I knew that this room, the pantry room, would turn out the way it would with the stairs, it still like isn't the most graceful room ever. so yeah, it's I have done designs in the past, like with single family homes, actually with the Bridgeview single family home, where I had to design the house right around the basement stairs. And I'm not opposed to doing that because you can make a set of basement stairs look good in a foundation. It's just that this wasn't necessarily the case in the Goth Manor build that I was doing, and I knew that it wouldn't be the case. And I also knew that I didn't want a set of basement stairs to be immediately accessible to the public anyways. I wanted the basement to feel a lot more private. In part 1, you would have seen me build out the solarium using the greenhouse DLC from the store for the windows and for the roof. Well, now we actually get to build what's in this solarium. And I guess the term solarium is something that has a lot of definitions to it, or a lot of people understand it differently. But essentially what I decided to make it was just sort of like an indoor greenhouse sort of vibe with a tea set, I suppose. I don't know what my inspiration for this is, except for maybe mistakenly thinking that solarium is a place where, you know, you can set up to have like high tea service and whatnot. But something else that I decided to add into this solarium was, of course, like a bird cage. Now in The Sims 3, like with the pets expansion pack, you can actually own and keep birds that you find out in the world. And in my SimCity world, I've been very good at like placing spawners throughout the entire world, either in Create a World or within the other lots and all of that. So you can definitely like capture a bird and then have it live in the cage just in the solarium at Goth Manor. I feel like that would be something that I could see happening here in Goth Manor, and so I just kind of wanted to place it here. When I was building out this mansion, I really wanted to give Sims a lot of things to do. And of course, like the solarium, having the tea set there and also the bird cages there gives your Sims like a lot of things to do, along with all the regular things that they would be doing, like cooking and sleeping and whatnot. There's also the magic bean bush that I decided to throw in there from the Supernatural expansion pack as well. But yeah, even with the library, like there are plenty of things to do with the train sets. There's the moon dial object that I never use, that I kind of discovered when doing this build, that I decided to throw in there. When we get to the basement, you'll see that there's even more things to do. Like there's, you know, TVs, and there's like more entertainment objects. And that's in part 3 of the build out, of course. But something that I really tried to keep in mind was giving a lot of activities for Sims to do. When I was building out this mansion, I did envision that players would likely use it for generation play, and so I figured that a great way to kind of keep all the Sims entertained is just to, you know, offer a lot of things to do in the actual world, in the actual lot itself. And you know, if you have an elder Sim that's staying at home looking after the kids, well, now they can have tea while the child is napping, or they can play with their pet bird. Maybe they're into gardening. You see, there's just a whole lot of things that you can have your Sims do, things on lots like this that are larger and that are more so outside of the city. And that's something that I have been keeping in mind when building out SimCity, is what the different lifestyles that can be offered to Sims are. And as you move away from the cities, you move away from the city core, I should say, you need to have more things to do on the lot itself, as opposed to like always driving into SimCity and going through that, because it is quite a bit of a distance for Sims to drive, even from Pleasant View. And so yeah, you need to have like more things to do and more resources that are nearby that city amenities wouldn't necessarily offer. I mean, if you're living in an apartment in the middle of Sim City, you're obviously going to have access to a lot more lots and a lot more entertainment options. Whereas when you're out in Pleasant View and even in Belladonna Valley, or even in Blue Water, one could argue, you need more entertainment close by directly on your lot, which is why, you know, the lot sizes are so big and why I am pretty much going pretty hard when it comes to building out these mansions and all that, is because I know gameplay wise it does take a little while. Now, when it comes to the rest of the backyard of Goth Manor, let me tell you that I really struggled with this one. This is one part of the build where I'm just really not confident in, and you're going to see me go through a couple of different versions of the backyard, versions that I'm not too proud of myself. But what I ended up doing with the backyard is I decided to put in a whole bunch of fountains because fountains take up space and I was just out of ideas, quite frankly. So I used some of the fountains from World Adventures. I also used the fountain tool at different parts of it. I really wanted it to, you know, kind of have that upscale garden feel in the backyard, while at the same time taking up the space that it needs to take up. And I also wanted it to fit the goth theme as well. So I'm using a lot of the what do you call it? The objects and the plants and the vegetation from Midnight Hollows? Is that the custom world? Gosh. I always get that one and Moonlight Falls mixed up because one came with Supernatural, the other one is a DLC world. But anyways, I used the one from the DLC world. Whichever one that's called. Midnight Hollow, I am pretty sure that's what it's called. And the other one is Moonlight Falls. But yeah, okay. I'm just going to go with Moonlight Hollow. I'm just going to go with Midnight Hollow. See, I even get mixed up there. I'm just going to go with that. And I used those objects. I used the vegetation there just to try to convey that it is a little bit darker and all of that. To play into those darker Gothic themes and to just kind of extend it outside of the house as well. And, you know, I'm not the best when it comes to landscaping using, you know, contemporary themes. So I'm really not sure how this one is going to turn out. Or, you know, if you guys have some brilliant ideas that are just cooking up, then feel free to drop that comment. I do not mind taking a suggestion for this. This is definitely a place where I think that I could use a little more work on. But anyways, one thing about the Goths that I remember from The Sims 1 is that they had a graveyard. So I wanted to incorporate that into the build. So I just kind of gave them a little mini graveyard. It took up some more space as well. So it was also strategic. You know, I referred back to the Sims lore when trying to figure out what to do on this one. And this is also like another reason why I didn't want to do a Victorian build per se, is because that the footprint of that house wouldn't be large enough to cover most of the lot, whereas the footprint of this one covers up a good third of the lot that I needed it to take up. And yeah, the backyard is huge despite the mansion itself being huge. And yeah, we'll just kind of, I put myself in a bind in a way just because the graveyard was, not the graveyard, the backyard was still quite large. One thing that I did try to do with the backyard, and this is something that I'm going to be doing for all of the Pleasant View lots, is I'm going to try and surround it where it makes sense with some bushes just to kind of add in that extra screen of privacy, that natural screen of privacy. When I was doing the Create a World series and building that out, I put in a bunch of those cypress trees just bordering the lots just to kind of give that extra sense of privacy. And so I wanted to try and continue that throughout here. But of course, like, those cypress trees are just simply too tall and it would ruin the views from the mansion and to the mansion. But yeah, that was something that I decided to add in. For the Pleasant View lots that have a slope to them on hillsides and whatnot, I'm not too sure if that's going to be something I'll continue to do, but for this one and for the Crumple Bottom Chateau, it felt right. So I continued throughout adding in matching screens essentially with those just to border the lots just a little more. The backyard of Goth Manor really doesn't come together until the end of this episode. And yeah, I really struggled with the backyard. So again, if you guys have any great ideas about backyard designs and landscaping designs and all that, feel free to sound off in the comments section below. I don't mind, and this lot is totally up for editing as well. So yeah, that is kind of where we end off the episode, is just really with me finishing up the backyard designs. You'll see me go through a couple of iterations of it. In fact, like one of the focal points that I decided to create was an altar at it. I don't know what the altar is for, but I just wanted to use those creepy statues, and all creepy things come in threes, so I used 3 of them. And at the end of the build, I have them all like staring down into one of the world adventure pools. I don't remember if I actually connect the pool to another one in the basement, because there are 2 of these world adventure pools. I'll have to review the footage and see if I actually do end up connecting them, but you know, there's a world adventure pool that you can just like dive into just to like get soaked and to like get treasures and stuff. I'm not too sure if it's even going to spawn treasures, but I think I might have actually connected it to the other one so you can actually teleport from one location to another. Really, really one of those things that I've done with the lot that just kind of adds like a certain amount of magic to it. I decided against like actually adding a real pool to the backyard because I didn't feel like it fit the Gothic theme and the darker themes well. Like I could always make the pool like red if I really wanted to, but I just felt like it didn't fit the theme, and so I just decided not to go into that direction. And actually another thing that that Goth Manor doesn't have is an indoor gym or anything of the sort, or even a sauna or a spa. Unlike the Crumple Bottom Chateau, which does have those amenities. So there's a couple of like Goth Manor doesn't have everything, but it does have a ballroom and a 3-story library, and that's pretty cool in of itself if you ask me. But yeah, I decided not to add in a pool because I just didn't feel like an outdoor pool fit the backyard, and it didn't fit the theme. And I also decided not to add in a pool house or an indoor pool, just again because I didn't feel like it really fit the lot or the build. I mean, I could maybe add in an indoor pool in the basement if I really wanted to, but I don't really want to, and I really like the way that Goth Manor turned out at the end of it, so I'm not going to be adding a pool anytime soon. You won't see it in this part, but you'll see it in the next part. I do end up adding in some spawners for the backyard. This is a larger lot, and like other larger lots, even residential lots, I'll add in spawners where I think it makes sense. I know I've been adding in lots of spawners throughout my SimCity builds, like in the community lots and even on some of the urban residential lots where I feel like it makes sense. And so I added in a couple more of those spawners here. One thing that I did absolutely remember to add in was the fog emitters, which I feel helped to, again, add in a creepier vibe, a darker vibe to Goth Manor that we would come to expect. And yeah, when paired with the graveyard, the private graveyard here, I suppose, and if you do have the Goth families and you add in their graves to the inventories, like you can have a pretty cool set of ghosts just kind of roaming around on the lot as well if you do decide to go through with the effort. But yeah, if you happen to forget that and your Goth family members decide to die, then you can always just throw their tombstones in the private graveyard that they have themselves. Yeah, this is a ghost friendly mansion if you guys didn't kind of catch the memo there. But yeah, the backyard is not like, backyard spaces are spaces that I'm generally not strong in anyways, unless I have like a very specific concept in mind. With the Crumple Bottom Chateau, there was barely any backyard space, so I didn't have to worry too much about filling the space per se with a set of classic gardens like I tried to do here. But I just added in like a hot tub, a pool, an outdoor pool, and I was able to just kind of convey the space that way. Here with Goth Manor, because I just felt like those specific motifs didn't fit the style and the theme, like it kind of it didn't do me any favors, is really what I'm trying to say. It kind of limited my options in terms of what I could achieve with it, and that was really a look of some sort of a classical garden with a focus or an emphasis on fountains, I suppose, and vegetation and all that. So that was kind of that. And I also didn't want to add in a traditional greenhouse either. I feel like the solarium kind of hits that nail on the head in terms of adding more infrastructure to this actual lot. And yeah, I really, if you couldn't tell, like I really struggled with the backyard, and you won't see it until the very end of the episode, but it all seems to come together then, and I will certainly like show you guys what it ended up looking like and all of that. But yeah, the backyard was something I really struggled with, and something I'm very open to different ideas or different interpretations of, if you guys want to drop some examples. As we wind up the episode and end things off, you'll just kind of see me finalize some of those fountains, and you'll just see me playing around a little bit with designs here and there. But I'll just kind of share with you guys what to expect. So part 3 of the Goth Manor build will be released. I did plan my comeback to YouTube and all that, just to kind of give you guys like a nice good taste as to what to expect with this channel going forward. And this mansion build honestly was a real, like, it really turned out beautifully. And so I really wanted to come back strong with that kind of video in play here. Not that I don't think that my other builds are very strong or anything, but this one really does a great job at achieving what it needs to achieve. But yeah, part 3 will be released right after this one. If it's a Saturday, then I'll be releasing a different kind of video, but I'm pretty sure that I'm releasing this one on a Tuesday. So next Thursday should be part 3 of the Goth Manor build. And with that one, I get to furnish the basement, the second floor, and the third floor. And luckily for me, the second and third floor had a lot of the heavy lifting done already in terms of me working ahead in this episode and actually decorating the upper levels of the ballrooms and of course the library. So there's a lot of heavy lifting that was already done for me. And when I actually get to part 3 here, you're just going to see me really go through each of the rooms quite quickly, starting with the basement and then working my way up to the second and third floors. So there's a lot to talk about in terms of vision and in terms of what I was trying to achieve for each of those looks. And yes, I do make a return back to some of the more vampiric themes as well when we get to the basement, of course, where all great vampires reside. So yeah, lots to look forward to there. I also want to share with you guys that that the rest of the series going forward, like after we finish up the Goth Manor build, there will certainly be a return back to the inner city neighborhoods of SimCity. I still have to build out Midtown, Uptown, the Far East neighborhood, and of course Bridgeview. So there's a lot more urban building being planned moving forward, and you know, these mansion builds are really here to help break up the pace, so that when I do get to actually focus in on Pleasant View, that I'm not overwhelmed, for one, because these mansions take a lot longer. Like this mansion build took me hours on hours on hours. I've never spent so many hours playing building one lot, and I hope it shows in a positive way. But yeah, that's kind of where I am at with that. The tours that I'm gonna have playing for today's episode is just kind of show you guys like where we left off and where we're at. The tours kind of build on top of each other with each of the parts. So part 3 will of course include the tour from part 2 and part 1, but also the remaining rooms that I wanted to show off in part 3. But yeah, that was really all that I wanted to say and really wanted to share with you guys. If the tours aren't already playing, then feel free to stick around for those. Otherwise, if you've enjoyed this episode, if you've enjoyed this series, then feel free to like this video and consider subscribing if you haven't already. I just want to take another minute here to say thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have yourself a wonderful day.